hope everybody's had a great week live on the Be a Pro series. I have an amazing guest today. I promised you guys for probably about the last 2 weeks that I was going to have a really, really special guest on, and I'm super excited about today. Our guest on the Be a Pro series today is Dr. Shane Creado. Dr. Shane is a sleep performance expert. He works with countless high performers, college, pro, and Olympic level athletes. He is a board certified psychiatrist and sleep medicine physician. He's also a sports psychiatrist and is on the board of the International Society of Sports Psychiatry. He is a high performer himself who's passionate about making sure that high performers are getting their rest and getting all the benefits from a good night's sleep. Dr. Shane, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for being on.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. Absolute pleasure being here and talking to you right now.
Yeah, I appreciate you. So I've got a copy of your book here. You sent this to me a couple of weeks ago, and I just want to recommend for anybody watching live or anybody that watches the replay, get a copy of this book. I've got my assistant Janelle, who is running the chat today, and she's going to put a link to Amazon for the book. I devoured this book, man. And I will say this, it's an easy read because it's very well written. So kudos to you on that. But you don't want to read it quickly because there is tons of information there to digest. I mean, this thing is research, science, and case study backed. You did an amazing job on this, man. I can tell you really poured your heart and soul into it. So, talk about quickly about, yourself, kind of your journey to where you are now, what led you to write the book, and, really what your passion is around sleep performance.
Definitely. So thank you for the great introduction. I've always been interested in helping people optimize. Ever since I started medical school, I just didn't want to help people carry on living substandard lives. I wanted them to improve the quality of their lives. So I went to physical therapy school actually before med school to improve their rehabilitation and quality of their lives. Then went to med school and focused in psychiatry. And within psychiatry, went on to do a lot of work within sports psychiatry, helping athletes perform. But I also found a big deficit there when it came to psychiatry and sleep, because there's so much overlap between sleep disorders and mental health issues. And a lot of psych meds affect sleep adversely, cause weight gain, impact your performance. And I didn't want everyone to just go on Ambien or Trazodone or medications rather than looking at the root of the problem. When we look at the death rates in this country, the most common causes of death are heart disease, accidents, cancers, directly linked to sleep issues. So that's a huge piece for us. So I did sleep medicine, and I'm working now at the Amen clinics, and I also have my own private consulting in sleep medicine, where we focus on brain health, not just years in medicine for anxiety or depression, but looking at the underlying factors, whether it's hormone imbalances, toxic exposures, sleep, exercise, nutrition, and that's where I am right now. The book incorporates all the skills I work with my elite athletes on in terms of sleep optimization, mental health, and performance optimization, not just athletic performance, Jimmy, but in every aspect of your life. Because sleep issues, sleep problems, sleep deprivation impact your hormones, your inflammation, the way you communicate with your loved ones. And so my goal for the book is to have every single person have access to these sleep skills that are simple, that are easy, going back to the basics, so that every single person who reads the book has access to the skills that only elite athletes usually have access to boost their lives and the quality of their lives.
Well, I think what you said is important too, because the book is called, Peak Sleep Performance for Athletes. But one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, why I thought this was so important, is because this is an issue that affects everybody, right? And you're in a unique position where, a lot of us kind of in this space, right, in the influencer thought leader space, we spend hours trying to decide who exactly is our target market, right? Who exactly are we speaking to? What is our really small, unique niche? And you're one of the only guys in this space, or maybe in any industry, that can say what I do is relevant for everybody. And, particularly for the sake of this conversation, this is not just about athletes, right? Sleep deprivation affects literally everyone. It's a huge problem in the country. You talked about, the real root of the problem. What is the real root of the problem? Why aren't people getting a good night's sleep? And then secondly on that, how does that affect, hormones? I know you talk at length in the book about, how that affects the aging, particularly with men and athletes, about lower testosterone and growth hormone levels and things like that. So, give me some information on that. I think that'd be really helpful for our viewers.
You got it. So it's estimated that around 70 million people in the US alone have a sleep disorder.
Wow.
That's not even counting people who have sleep deprivation or inadequate sleep. 35% of adults have sleep problems, 69% of kids and adolescents in this country. So it is an epidemic. Look at COVID with sleep deprivation and the overlap between the work that we do and our personal lives. It's devastating people's routines as well. So yeah, it's all about getting back to the routines, getting back to the basics. We don't need fancy technology to help us sleep better. We need systems in place to have the regularity and maintain our sleep and wake cycles. So as we discussed just prior to this conversation, what you do while you're awake is as important as what you're doing prior to sleeping and when you wake up.
That's a big point. Go elaborate on that, man, because I think that's huge, and even a part of that is, how important. I talked yesterday on my live stream about a morning routine, right?
Yeah.
Talk about how important an evening routine is, kind of a wind down period and a way to really prepare yourself to get a good night's sleep.
Right. So the brain is not a light bulb. It cannot just be switched on and off whenever you like. So as we're doing active stuff during the day, our brain needs to be allowed to wind down. We all need what would be called a daily download, or a to-do list for the next day, a worry list, so that we don't use the bed for doing those things. And we have busy lives, Jimmy. We're always on our phones, on the computer, doing the things we need to do. But the time we are left to our own devices is usually around bedtime. And that's when our thoughts rise to the surface. We lie in bed, start thinking about what we did today, what we didn't do a good enough job on, what we need to do the next day. And we're actually training our brains, Jimmy, to associate the bed with wakeful worry. And insomnia is not really a lack of sleep, but an excessive wakefulness of the brain. So we're associating the bed with high intensity activities like worry and problem solving. And people make a big difference. They could get confused between overthinking and problem solving.
Got you.
Right? So I always advise everyone I work with, look forward to sleep. That's your protected time. That's your vacation time. Okay, and you need to prepare for vacation. So take an hour or even 90 minutes, having that nice wind down routine. Maybe a warm shower, hyperbaric oxygen, meditation, a boring book, nothing activating. And so your brain will start getting used to the fact that, hey, okay, Jimmy started this warm shower and now we're going to do some meditation. We're winding down. Dim the lights in your house so that your natural melatonin levels can rise the way they should. And you're not going to be knocked out, but you're going to be able to drift into sleep. And sleep is measured in cycles, not really in hours. So one sleep cycle is around 90 minutes. So 6 hours of sleep, 4 sleep cycles. 9 hours of sleep, 6 sleep cycles. Each one's brain is different. So if you allow yourself normal sleep cycles, a nice wind down and a waking up routine like you described so great yesterday, then it makes a lot of sense. Your brain will rise to the occasion when it needs to. Your hormones will be rising and decreasing as they should, and you're well regulated. You're not going to be chasing the day. You're not going to be running on fumes. And it's not as if you're now supposed to suppress your melatonin one day because you woke up at 7 a.m. and another day you're lying in bed for an hour because you don't need to have a meeting until 10 a.m.
Right.
So it's called social jet lag. We actually force ourselves into this jet lag pattern, Jimmy. Of course, we're going to have the same effects that we do when we really travel. Irritability, frustration, inflammation, difficulty with processing, concentration issues. A lot of people are misdiagnosed with ADHD when in fact it's just a matter of sleep deprivation.
Yes.
They don't know how much sleep is ideal for their brain.
Well, and we get into these cycles, right? Where, people are sleep deprived. And so they're dealing with sleepiness during the day. So then they go get a prescription for a drug that will keep them up. We get into these cycles to try to fix a problem that creates a new problem or furthers or perpetuates the real problem, kind of back to your point about the root cause of the problem. But with everything you just said, I think one of the things that is kind of a universal question among people when the topic or the conversation of, a good night's sleep comes up is, in your opinion, what is the optimal number of hours of sleep? And to further that, what's the time frame that's best? My dad, for instance, always told me when I was a kid that, hours of sleep before midnight, are more quality than hours after. And I don't know if that was just, one of those things that parents say that we just accept as true, or whether there's some actual basis to that. So, what's the time window in an ideal world, if we could all say, hey, I can go to bed and get up anytime. What's that ideal window and what's the optimal number of hours of sleep?
Okay, some people are night owls, some people are morning birds. So what if we all didn't have any work to do, then we would naturally feel sleepy around between 9 and 11 p.m. when our melatonin levels rise, and we'd wake up early in the morning. But that's not the way the world works. So I would say if someone gets 7.5 hours of sleep a night, that's 5 sleep cycles of 90 minutes each. That's typically more or less what most people get. However, if you're young, if you're an adolescent, or if you're an elite athlete, you're going to need more because you need your sleep to be your recovery vehicle. So I'm going to say for an average person, a young adult, you might need 9 hours of sleep a night. If you're an athlete like Roger Federer, he needs 12 hours of sleep a night. So it just depends on your brain, the level of activity you have as well. So the more activity you're engaged in, the more high functioning you are, the more recovery sleep you're going to need. And your father was onto something there, Jimmy, because the first half of the night is where we have deeper stages of sleep.
Okay.
The later half of the night is where we have more dream sleep. But in the first half of the night with deep sleep, that's where your maximum growth hormone is released. So think about this. A lot of kids, adolescents on their phones till late into the night, they're actually basically causing their growth hormone production to decrease. They might have growth impediments as well.
Man, that is so interesting. I love that concept because, again, there's so much debate out there about that. I've listened to podcasts with different sleep experts or, different people in other industries that have devoted some research to, optimal sleep. And there's all different narratives out there, right? That we really only need 6 hours, or everybody's different. And some people are totally fine on 4 hours. Another question that I think a lot of people have is, in those cases where you just don't get the optimal hours, you're traveling or something comes up and you get to bed at midnight one night and you got to get up at 5 or 6 the next day. You talk a little bit about it in the book. Talk about the importance of napping. Is that a way to really recover some of those hours that you may have lost the night before, or set yourself up to sleep better that coming night? Talk about that. I've never been a napper. I know a lot of athletes and friends that are big nappers. It's just never been something that was really a part of my routine, but talk about that.
Definitely. So first of all, each one has different amounts of sleep that they need. So how do you know how much sleep your brain really needs? COVID is perfect time to figure out because we're all quarantined anyway.
Yes.
Right? So the best way to do that is you can always download a sleep diary or use a Fitbit to just track how many hours of sleep you're getting every night. And then fill out a simple scale. There's a Stanford Sleepiness Scale. You can download it for online and just fill it out at maybe 9 a.m., 12 p.m., 1 p.m., 6 p.m., 3 p.m., 6 p.m., 9 p.m. And so you figure out just one circle. See how sleepy you are during the course of a day. And then perhaps extend your sleep. Okay, fine. With 7 hours of sleep a night, I'm super sleepy at different points in the day. Maybe let me try 8 hours of sleep a night and see how I'm doing. So in the absence of some sleep disorders like sleep apnea or really bad meds, in the absence of all that stuff, you can figure out how much sleep your brain actually needs every night. And then you can slot that in. Of course, life happens to us, right? It's not as if we can always get 9 hours of sleep a night, including that wind down period that I described. So that's where strategic napping comes into play. If you read any sleep hygiene stuff online, they say, oh, napping is bad, avoid naps. Not necessarily. NASA did a study that showed that pilots who napped for 26 minutes, their reaction times and alertness were boosted by 34 and 54%.
Yeah, I've seen some of those studies. Yeah, elaborate on that. I think that's super fascinating.
So napping is really good, really helpful if you know what you're doing. There was another study out of Finland 2 years ago that said that regular nappers have a 37% decrease in their risk of heart attacks. So what do you do about that? If you can't make up all your sleep at night, then you can strategically nap. There's generally 2 windows during the day when you can nap, where your melatonin kind of peaks a little bit. One is around 1 p.m. for most people, and the other window that you have is around 4 p.m. for most people. Most of you may know this. After you've had a meal in the afternoon, you're going to feel really sleepy.
Right.
Or when you come home after work, you're driving and you might feel dozy. Or when you get home, you just feel like falling asleep on the couch. So you have 2 windows there. And I'd say if you are feeling sleepy consistently during the day, use that 1 p.m. nap opportunity. Limit it to around 25 minutes. If you really need another nap, around the 4 p.m. window, again, limiting to 25 minutes. If you limit it to 25 minutes, you're not going to wake up later, 45 minutes or an hour later, where you're in deeper stages of sleep. So you wake up as if you've been hit by a truck. You'll wake up fresh. And if you only limit it to that amount of time, then it's not going to really affect your ability to fall asleep during the night when you're supposed to fall asleep. So you're boosting your energy, giving your brain the rest that it needs, and it doesn't destabilize your natural biological rhythms. When it comes to travel, since you asked about that,
Yes.
our lives get busy, right? And there are certain days, if you want to go out with your friends one night, if you have to work on an assignment till late into the night, particular night, then your sleep can be disrupted. But if you know that that's going to happen, you can bank your sleep. You might be able to nap or perhaps go to sleep a little earlier and a couple of nights before that. So you're kind of building up your sleep reserve.
Okay.
The golden rule is always keep your wake up time the same. Always keep it the same. And if you've lost sleep a particular night, it's not the end of the world. We know that if your brain needs 5 sleep cycles of 90 minutes each every night, 7.5 hours, then over the next week, you're going to need 5 into 7. You're going to need 35 sleep cycles. So if you can play catch up based on your sleep cycles, you're golden. So if you've had a night of sleep deprivation, if you've traveled, red eye, whatever it is, use a 90-minute sleep cycle early in the afternoon to play catch up. And it's not going to affect your ability to fall asleep the next night.
So speaking of travel, because again, that's one of the things you talk about in the book, and you talk about in the book, in relation to athletes that, play in different time zones. I remember being, with the Redskins or the Falcons out here on the East Coast and flying out to Seattle and playing a 1 p.m. game, or going from the West Coast out to the East Coast and we play a 1 p.m. game, which is, 10 o'clock a.m. West Coast time. Body's not woken up, not ready for that. The sleep cycle is disrupted. You lay out some really, really cool little hacks, if you will, little tips about things that you can do when you're traveling to try to regulate your sleep as much as possible. Things like, pack your pillow or bring your comforter. And again, that's something that I think is key for everybody, not just athletes. A lot of high performing business executives travel at length, travel a couple hundred days a year. So talk a little bit about some more of those tips that people can use when they're traveling, not just to avoid jet lag, but to actually get a good night's sleep in, an unfamiliar environment like a hotel room.
Yeah, so that brings up an important point, Jimmy, because you don't need to travel across time zones in order for your sleep to be messed up, right? So there's travel fatigue, there's quick turnaround times, even within the same time zone. Airline cabins are as dry as the Sahara Desert, so you're going to be dehydrated as well. You're cramped in a really weird position. You may nap on the flight, even if it's a 3-hour flight, which might mess with your sleep. So always be prepared. If you know you're going to travel across time zones, then take the strategic nap like I described. Also, try and have as familiar an environment as possible. The softest mattresses are not always the best. They can always cause aches and pains if they're too soft. So take whatever you can with you, maybe an eye mask, maybe your favorite pillow. A hypoallergenic comforter would always be great because we don't want those dust mites getting the better of us.
Mhm.
Take a light box if you have a light box to get the bright light therapy, or shades to kind of cover your eyes with intense sunlight in different time zones. So you come armed with all of that. And I work with my executives and the athletes I work with. And okay, this is your sleep performance pack. All this stuff is what you need to take with you. You're traveling only for 3 hours, but okay, if it's across the coasts, if you're living in LA and you're traveling to New York, 10 p.m. LA time is 1 a.m. New York time. So you're automatically a night owl over there because you're not going to want to fall asleep until 10 p.m. LA time. So how do we shift your rhythms? Maybe melatonin just a little earlier, very low dose, maybe light therapy in the morning so that you kind of push your sleep cycle that way. But the familiarity is key. Dehydration is a big issue that can impact your circadian rhythms. And of course, stretching, walking around the plane, keeping a little active. Exercise 3 hours before bedtime is bad, but stretching is great. It can
Okay.
promote sleep. And then maintain that nice wind down routine even in the new time zone.
I love it. Awesome information. Guys, if you're tuned in, please ask those questions in the chat box. I know Dr. Shane would love to get as many of your questions answered as possible. So let's drop those questions in there. Janelle will send them over to me and we'll make sure that we get them to Dr. Shane so we can get them answered. I love for this to be interactive. I like it for it to be an open conversation. And so I'm inviting you to participate. Drop those questions in the chat box. Dr. Shane, one of the things that really stood out to me in your book, because it was relative to me, pertinent to me, was kind of the correlation that you made, or your chapter on concussions and sleep, and how sleep can affect the someone recovering from a concussion, and kind of the link there between the two. Talk a little bit about that, because concussions, obviously, over the last 10 years, but more specifically, probably the last 4 or 5 years, have really been in the spotlight, not just in football, but in many other contact and some non-contact sports. This issue of concussions and traumatic brain injury and brain health in particular have really been at the forefront of a lot of conversations. And I know you're an expert in that. So talk about that.
Yeah, so concussions, sports concussions are a fact of life. Not just sports concussions, Jimmy, but we can hit our heads doing all sorts of things. People hit their heads trampolining. The sport with the highest incidence of head injuries is actually jockeys because they're bouncing up and down all the time. The brain is as soft as butter. We have a hard, bony skull, and every little impact matters, whether or not it's considered or a documented concussion. Those series of impacts really add up. And so we've always worked with our athletes in terms of understanding that getting good quality sleep is going to be so important, because you can actually reduce the incidence of concussions through better sleep, because your
Wow.
reaction times will be much quicker.
Wow.
So you'll see the guy coming out at you from the corner of your eye, and you can make adjustments suitably. We know that your reaction times can be dropped by over 300% with sleep deprivation.
Wow. Yeah,
So if you have this,
you talk about in there that some of the correlations between, certain amounts of sleep deprivation is the equivalent of having X number of beers or alcoholic beverages when people are
yeah,
driving, or their cognitive ability.
yeah. So there were studies done that showed getting 6 hours of sleep is equivalent to consuming 2 or 3 beers, and getting 4 hours of sleep is equivalent to 5 or 6 beers,
Wow.
and 2 hours of sleep equivalent to 7 or 8 beers, or no sleep equivalent to 10 or 11 beers. That's scientific fact. And so why does it happen? The same areas of the brain that are most impacted with sleep deprivation are affected with alcohol consumption. And those are the most vulnerable regions in concussions:
That's
the
crazy.
frontal lobes and the temporal lobes. It is crazy. And that's, you look at punch drunk syndrome, you look at
Yep.
drunk people, and you look at sleep deprivation, we feel drunk. Direct correlations with accident risk and drowsy driving. And basically what happens there is, with concussions, you're set up for disaster. You're more likely to have a concussion if you're sleep deprived. And then recovery is really going to be difficult. Recovery from a concussion, because concussions are directly associated with sleep problems. There was a meta-analysis, a huge study of survivors, over 1,700 survivors of TBI across 21 studies. The most common sleep disturbances were insomnia, 50% of them, poor sleep efficiency, nightmares, sleep apnea in 23 to 36% of people, compared to 2 to 15% of the normal population. Restless legs was increased.
Wow.
Circadian rhythm disruptions as well. And the brain typically needs more sleep after a concussion to help heal. So if we're not allowing ourselves that, and we're saying, oh, I'm just sleepy or I'm just lazy, you're actually prolonging your recovery from a concussion. And there's people who have developed narcolepsy from a concussion or a hit to the head in the wrong place. So sleep before, and if you have a concussion after, is going to be critical in helping your brain heal so you can get back to performing the way you want to. And those areas of the brain that we just spoke about, Jimmy, I just wanted to touch on those a little bit, because when people know what those brain regions do, you'll be really familiar with yep, that's what's happened with me. So whether it's sleep deprivation or alcohol consumption or head injuries, the frontal lobes tend to be damaged and the temporal lobes most of the time. The frontal part of the brain helps us with attention, concentration, executive functioning, task organization, planning, multitasking, motivation, drive, social connectedness, rational thinking. It's part of the brain that makes us human. So if that shuts down, we'll be more impulsive. Our emotions will rise to the fore. So we'll be more irritable. We won't be able to multitask. We'll struggle with processing, with concentration. And the temporal lobes are also affected. So they help us with emotional stability, new learnings, dreams, memory consolidation. You're not going to remember the plays that you practiced if you're sleep deprived.
Right.
So your concentration shuts down, your memory inbox shuts down. So you're not going to be able to focus, remain engaged, your reaction times will reduce, and you can't retain that information. You're more irritable, more frustrated. Look, we do a lot of crazy things when we consume alcohol. So your brain is really functioning drunk when you are sleep deprived, or whether you have social jet lag or jet lag.
Unbelievable. So I've got a question here from Patty from Facebook. She says, sometimes I'll wake up at 3 a.m. and I'll be wide awake, but then I'll be exhausted around 3 p.m. What do you recommend I do when this happens? Should I just stay in bed? In other words, she's saying, should I, even though I wake up at 3 and I'm kind of alert and ready to go, should I just stay in bed for a couple extra hours? Maybe she should try to get a nap in sometime in the afternoon. What do you recommend in a situation like that?
Okay, most of the time people will tend to wake up in the middle of the night around 3 p.m., especially if there's anxiety, because in the later half of the night, you have more dream sleep. So the brain will go through the same cycles you were doing during the day. So at night, you'll have more scary dreams, more wakeful dreams. You'll wake up in sweats. If you're hitting menopause, you're middle-aged, you're more likely to wake up in the middle of the night. If you have sleep apnea, more likely to wake up in the middle of the night. Or if you've had alcohol before bed, it's going to burn off your receptors really quick, but then wake you up, you'll be super alert, ready to go around 3 a.m. So what do? Don't stay in bed. That's the one thing I advise my patients to do, is not to stay in bed, because all you're going to do is start worrying and thinking. So if you can fall asleep within 20 minutes or so without clock watching, then that's fine. But if you can't fall asleep and your estimate is over 20 or 30 minutes, that's fine. Get out of bed, do calming meditation, read a boring book, do some light stretches. It's all good. If you have to wake up at 5 a.m. and you can't fall back asleep, that's okay. You can take a nap at 3 p.m. But if you have to wake up at 7 a.m., it's no problem. You wake up, you do your relaxing routine, and you go back to the bed when you are sleepy. Why? Because if you are using the bed for wakeful worry, tossing and turning, you're then associating the bed with worry and trying to fall asleep. The harder you try, the more likely you are to fail. So sleep is about relaxing the brain.
Right.
Also, please don't try and do stuff. Oh, I'm super active now. Let me get this laundry list taken care of. Let me write my to-do list. No, because then you're giving your insomnia a function, and your brain will think, oh, 3 a.m. is my work time. So let's do it.
Yeah.
Right?
So, one of the things I heard years ago, that I've tried off and on is when you're having problems just falling asleep, right? So a lot of times over the years, I've said to myself, I'm going to get in bed at 10 o'clock. I'm going to get back into that sleep routine that I had. You know, you and I talked off camera about when I was a teenager, I was on point with my sleep schedule, in bed every night at 9 p.m. And because my body was so used to that, I was out at 9:15, no later than 9:30. As I gotten older, you know, I've fallen off of that a little bit. But there are times, you know, when I say I'm gonna get disciplined again about getting in bed at 9:30 or 10 p.m. And then at midnight, I'm still laying there looking at the ceiling trying to fall asleep. And so years ago, I heard a sleep doctor give some advice around if you're laying in bed, you know, for more than 30, 45 minutes and can't fall asleep, to, you know, get up, maybe walk downstairs, or do, you know, just some really small activity for 5 or 10 minutes to give your mind a chance to kind of start the cycle over, and then go back up and get in your bed and kind of start the cycle over. Do you agree with something like that? Or do you have, you know, maybe a better practice or a better tactic we could use in a situation like that?
You got it. So anyone who's waking up in the middle of the night, I encourage them, okay, you know you're going to wake up in the middle of the night. So before you go to bed, part of that wind down routine that we discussed earlier, perhaps create a little cubby for yourself, a nice relaxing little couch, or a bean bag, or a big comfy chair with a blanket, with some meditation music to listen to, something calming, a really boring book. That's your cozy cubby. So even if you wake up in the middle of the night, can't fall back asleep within 20 minutes or so, you're not going to be so reluctant to get out of bed. Oh, it's cold out there, I don't want to go out there. No, it's going to be calm. It's going to be your cozy place. You can do something relaxing. A lot of times people make the big mistake of saying, okay, I'm going to go to bed at 9 a.m. tonight, and this is going to be how it's going to be. I always say, lock in your wake up time. Don't lock in your night time, your bedtime.
Okay, good point. I like that.
Right? So your wake up time is going to be consistent. Set 3 alarms if you have to, far away from your bed, so you don't just get up, but get out of bed at that time.
That's key, right? It's to actually get out of bed. I've read that and heard that from various different sleep experts, that one of the best things you can do to train your brain in a number of different ways, to train your brain to do what you tell it to do when you want it to do it, is the minute that alarm goes off, to actually get out of bed, right? Don't lay there for 10, 15, 20 minutes and scroll on your phone or do whatever.
Yes, because your brain will think, oh, the bed is okay for all these other activities, rather than associating it with just sleep or sex. That's what it's for. It's not meant for anything else. So your brain will be conditioned, like Pavlov, that old Russian scientist, did with his dogs and the salivation and the bell. We're associating the bed with all these other activities, which is bad, which is really dangerous for our brains. Sleep is our vacation time. The bed is our vacation place.
For years, I had a TV in my bedroom, and I've always been one of those guys that I like my bedroom to be really comfortable, because I like to spend time in my bedroom. You know, I always look, any house that I live in, I want it to have a nice, big, comfortable bedroom, you know, a nice, big, comfortable master suite. And again, as I've read and kind of studied some of this, that is not a good habit and not a good practice for optimal sleep, to spend time in your bedroom or use your bed really for anything other than sleep and sex, like you said, because you'll start to train your brain that it's for all these different things. And what you want is, you want your brain to think the moment you walk into your bedroom or you sit down or lay down in your bed, that it's time to go to sleep and get in that habit, in that pattern.
Absolutely. Now, some people may say, well, I watch TV in bed, I read in bed, I don't have a problem falling asleep. Amazing. Good for you.
Good for you.
But good for you. But if you are waking up unrefreshed or feeling like you've been hit by a truck, then you're sleep depriving yourself. And it's going to cause you to suffer in the long term. Your DNA will fragment, inflammation will rise, you're putting yourself at risk of cancer and dementia, heart disease, and strokes. So if you are getting adequate sleep and you're falling asleep fine, you like reading in bed, great. You're waking up refreshed, stick to what you're doing.
Got
But
you.
if you're suffering, if you're not performing at your peak, or if you're feeling sleepy during the day, or if you're feeling irritable or groggy or snappy when you wake up, you're not getting enough sleep. So that's why it's so important that the bed is just meant for you to sleep along with the wind down routine. Because what happens is people who don't manage to fall asleep confuse sleepiness, Jimmy, with tiredness.
Got
So
you.
they go to sleep, go to the bed when they're feeling tired, and their brain is going to start racing, because that time is our time. We're always so busy, but our brain can start those thoughts going. Then you'll worry, oh, it's an hour already, I'm still not asleep. Then you'll try to sleep, which will wake your brain up some more. Then you're associating the bed with wakefulness and worry. And then you start thinking, oh, tomorrow's going to be awful. My meeting is going to suck. I'm going to be terrible. My boss is going to hate me some more. And so we start believing the lies we tell ourselves. And that whole cascade can set us up for failure. And we actually practice negative habits that sustain. And it's hard to break those habits, Jimmy.
Man, great stuff. I love that differentiation between being tired and being sleepy, right?
Yeah,
That's a key differentiation because again, a lot of people conflate the two and use those terms interchangeably, but they're two different things, is what you're saying.
absolutely. You know, if you've had an intense training session or after a game, you're tired, but your mind is racing. You're full of adrenaline. You're ready to go. You're not
Wired.
sleepy.
Why? I remember coming home from,
Yeah.
we would play a game, um, start like a 1 p.m. game, or sometimes you'd play a late game, a 4 p.m. game. And I'd get home around 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. And I'm, just spent all day, playing an NFL football game and be absolutely wired. Like you said, tired, didn't want to go work out or go out to a club and hang out, but literally just brain just zing, zing, zing. I mean, just completely wired.
Yep. Same thing with these night games with the NBA. So I've actually had some of my players work on neurofeedback, some really practiced meditations. And you don't have to try something new every time. Practice a meditation to calm down, a breathing routine, and stick to it. So simple breathing technique I have my athletes and anyone I work with follow is the 4-7-8 rule. So breathe in for 4 seconds through the nose, hold it for 7 seconds, and breathe out through the mouth for 8 seconds. That's basically what the military teaches snipers to
Yes.
calm their heart
I've
rates
seen
down,
that. Absolutely. Brings anxiety down, calms your heart rate. Yes.
slows your heart rate down. So, I mean, I'm curious to know, because we had a conversation earlier, Jimmy.
Mhm.
You somehow intuitively knew how to take care of your body and recovery sleep. So I'm curious to know what your practices were when you were playing at the elite level.
So, I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier. When I was really young, I'm talking about, 14, 15, 16 and into college. Um, I didn't know why I was so particular and so disciplined about my sleep schedule. I didn't know that there was so many negatives to sleep deprivation and so many positive things to getting a good night's sleep. But I spent those teen years when I was really trying to grow and get bigger and stronger and faster, all these things to make me a better athlete. I spent those teen years getting a good 8.5, 9 hours of sleep a night. I mean, I was in bed, like I said, every night at 9 o'clock. This was in the school year and even in the summertime, up at 5:30 or 6, getting a couple workouts in. Um, that changed a little bit when I got to college, living in a dorm with a bunch of other buddies and kind of living the college life. I bumped it back to 10 or 10:30, but I was still pretty consistent on that. And throughout my pro career, during the season specifically, was really, really consistent on being in bed around 10 and up at 6.
Yeah.
And, one of the things after reading your book that really blew my mind when I thought back on my pro football career. And then I think about, friends over the years that I've known that have played in the NBA, that have played other pro sports. When you look at some of the practices that pro sports organizations undertake and some of the things that their players go through, and the lack of sleep that these guys are performing at really, really high levels on them. And you think about an NBA player, they play a 7:30 game, they get on a plane at 10 p.m. and fly to the next city, get in at 3 a.m. and they've got shoot around the next morning at 10 a.m. and then they go play another 48-minute game. I know I had told you a story earlier where the night before a game, an NFL football game, when we would stay in a team hotel, we would have meetings that started at 9 p.m. And that meeting would go from 9 p.m. anywhere to 9:45 or 10 p.m. And then we'd go into a little cafeteria room where they'd have a little nighttime snack, right? And that snack was, I'm not going to lie, it was one of my favorite days of the week, because in that snack room was pizza and hamburgers and French fries. And then I always made sure on my way out the door to get a nice hot fudge sundae with nuts and all the toppings on it, and put that down, then go up to my room and expect to get a good night's sleep, right? And what I was using to make sure that I got that good night's sleep was an Ambien, So, I mean, myself and hundreds of other pro athletes across all sports are almost, in some cases, they've got no choice but to do everything wrong when it comes to optimal sleep, while you're traveling and during the season. And when I read your book and I started to put all that together, it really blew my mind that these pro sports organizations, which have access to people like yourself, right, that are true experts in these fields, and they're not utilizing the knowledge and the research and the science that doctors like yourself have spent years studying. It blew my mind.
That is so true, Jimmy. And the purpose of the book is hopefully to create a revolution in sport and sleep. Look, as an elite athlete, you know that people focused on your mental conditioning, training, what you put in your body, your nutrition, nourishing your body, all that stuff. But sleep was never really addressed. And sleep is an anchor of performance. Casey Smith, the head athletic trainer of the NBA's Mavericks, said if you told an athlete you had a treatment that would reduce the chemicals associated with stress, naturally increase human growth hormone, enhance recovery rate, and improve performance, they'd all do it.
Give me that drug. Give me that pill.
Exactly. Give me that pill. But it's sleep. It's sleep optimization, not just to improve performance and major performance improvements, like 20% in tennis serving or NBA shooting accuracy by 9%. Whereas
that's crazy. That's crazy. That's the difference between Steph Curry and an average player.
Yes.
9% shooting percentage.
Exactly. And speaking about comparisons there, we know that when we looked at the Beijing Olympics as well, there was a 1% difference between the person who got the gold medal in the women's running and the person who came in fourth place. 1%. Look at Michael Phelps and Milorad Kovic in 2008 Beijing Olympics. 1/100th of a second. So even 1% will make the difference between you make it to the gold medal or don't even stand a chance. And
well, I was going to say, think about 100-meter sprinters, right? Where you're talking about 1/100th of a second of reaction time getting out the blocks, or even, you talk about cognitive impairment, just your nervous system being able to fire, right? Athletic ability. People always talk about it just in terms of strength and speed, but one of the huge factors in, speed and quickness, and like you talked about, the ability of a boxer or a fighter to slip a punch or to brace for a hit, is how fast that signal can travel from your brain through the neural pathway to the muscle to make that contraction, to make it happen. And if a couple extra hours of sleep per night can help that process happen faster, how much better can we perform in look, again, not just in sports, in all areas of our life?
You said it. Even getting off the blocks in swimming, they found that if you don't get optimal, not normal, but optimal sleep, you're 17% slower getting off the blocks. Game over.
It's crazy.
You're done.
You don't have that type of, that is such a huge window. You don't have time for that much margin of error. I mean, when you talk about high performers, you just don't have it. We're talking milliseconds here that make the difference.
You said it.
Yeah. I got a question on Facebook, Doctor, from David. He asked if you could just talk a little bit about sleep apnea. I don't know maybe what specifically, but just talk about that a little bit and maybe shed some light on that for David.
Okay, so sleep apnea is a pause in your breathing, sleep while we're asleep. Most commonly, people know obstructive sleep apnea, where the airway collapses, the tongue falls back, and you snore, and your wife probably wants to suffocate you with a pillow,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Right. So it's really common in middle-aged guys or people who are overweight, obese. But it can also happen in a lot of wrestlers, people with thick necks. A lot of rugby players also have sleep apnea. There's another kind of sleep apnea called central sleep apnea, where the brain, in cases of concussions or for other reasons, cannot regulate your breathing while you're asleep. And so it kind of stops, you stop breathing periodically during the course of the night. So sleep apnea simply pauses in breathing while you are asleep. The problem here is if it's not diagnosed, say you're not snoring or snoring mildly, or you don't have a wife, maybe you scared away your bed partners, whatever it is, you will feel miserable every day.
And
You
not
wake up
know
with a
why,
dry
right?
mouth. You won't know why. Wake up with a dry mouth, a morning headache. You won't be able to concentrate, focus. You'll be really irritable. You'll wake up feeling like you've been hit by a truck. Those are various symptoms that give us clues. Okay, snoring, pauses in our breathing, morning headaches, difficulty functioning at work, feeling sleepy during the day. Oh, I got 9 hours or 10 hours of sleep. I'm still feeling sleepy during the day. It might be that you have undiagnosed sleep apnea. Now, the problem with sleep apnea is much larger than this. There's been direct correlations with impotence, low testosterone, sudden death, heart attacks, strokes, and cancers,
Wow.
high blood pressure as well with untreated sleep apnea. So it's one of the most deadly diseases that people don't give enough attention to. We found that people who have sleep apnea will have shorter lives and will have really bad functioning when it comes to the brain. So you might lose your job because you can't focus or because you're falling asleep and people think you're lazy. Please get tested. And it's not just a matter of CPAP. Oh, I don't want that thing on my face. It depends on what position you're in. If you're on your back, you're going to have worse sleep apnea because your airway collapses that way. If you've had alcohol before bedtime, it's going to make your muscles more relaxed. You'll have more severe episodes of sleep apnea. But there's other techniques: weight loss, staying off your back, um, mandibular devices or jaw devices. It's not that sleep apnea is only treated with CPAP. Bottom line is, please get yourself treated, because every night you're sleeping and you may have sleep apnea, your brain is suffocating, you're putting a strain on your heart and your lungs, you're setting yourself up for early death.
Got it. Yeah. So key takeaway on that, go see, who would you recommend, Dr. Shane? A sleep specialist, go to a sleep clinic to get tested, to undergo some tests for that?
Yeah, you could talk to your primary care doc. They could send you a referral form. You can do a home sleep study, or you can get in touch with a sleep doc. And there's a screening tool we use called the Stop Bang, which has 8 questions. You circle them. If you're yes on 3 or more, you need to be tested. You're high risk of having sleep apnea.
Got you. Gotcha. Awesome stuff. What do you think about the phone apps like Calm and Breathe and things like that to help people fall asleep? Just maybe kind of another little tool that people can use to fall asleep more peacefully. Do you think those are helpful? Is that something that if you're somebody that's having trouble falling asleep, are some of those sleep apps valuable?
Yeah, those sleep apps can be helpful because they can calm your busy brain down. And I advise my patients to stick to whatever they like. You want to pick some YouTube, some calming music. You want to pick Calm or Breathe to Relax, or the 10% Happier app, or the Headspace app, which has some nice sleep stories, sleep casts. Whatever works for you, you're going to do that. But stick to what works for you. Don't be experimenting late at night, because that's just going to throw you off.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume that you would not recommend people using sleep aids, particularly like pharmaceutical sleep aids, like I talked about, like Lunesta, Ambien, and different things like that. Am I correct in saying that long-term, prolonged use of sleep aids would not be recommended?
I agree with you. The sleep aids are only supposed to be used for a short duration. They're not supposed to be used long term. And when we talk about sleep aids, you have to know that all the prescription sleep aids, most of them have a black box warning by the FDA, because you're putting yourself at risk of sleepwalking, sleep talking. Some people even perform sex acts while they're asleep. Major legal implications there, understandably. And some of these sleep aids have been associated with increased dementia risk. So
Wow.
Klonopin, clonazepam, Valium, benzodiazepines directly correlated with dementia in long-term studies. They also cause your muscles to be more relaxed. So if you have sleep apnea, you're going to set yourself for worse sleep apnea, more brain suffocation while you're asleep. And the
Any
over-the-counter meds like Tylenol PM, any of those PM meds have antihistaminergic properties, which can cause restless leg syndrome, which can disrupt your sleep, and can also put you at risk of dementia because they also block acetylcholine, which is a major neurotransmitter for memory.
any natural remedies, like over the counter melatonin or valerian or kava or things like that people have used for a number of years, just as calming tools or sleep aids, kind of more on the natural side?
Yeah. So kava can cause some liver issues. So I think it'd be best to avoid it. Some people want to
Okay.
use CBD, THC,
Mhm.
but you need very high doses of CBD and you need a very good quality product. There was a study out yesterday that showed that most CBD products have some amount of THC in them as well. And so my favorite sleep supplements tend to be low dose melatonin. I say
Got you.
low dose, I mean less than 3 milligrams, okay, even 1.5 milligrams.
Got you.
90 minutes before your desired bedtime, because it's
90
not
minutes.
supposed to,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
it's not supposed to knock you out. It's as effective as switching a light bulb off. That's what melatonin is supposed to do. GABA is a good one. 5-HTP, which gets converted to serotonin, is a good one. Vitamin B6 is a good supplement as well. Lemon balm extract, L-theanine, but in the right doses, at the right time, for the right person. So in my work in sleep medicine, I designed a sleep supplement for Dr. Amen, the brain MD, sleep supplement company. Well, it's called Put Me to Sleep, and it has the right doses of melatonin, GABA, 5-HTP, and vitamin B6. So it allows your brain to relax. It'll be really helpful for people in their initial wind down period before bedtime to help the brain calm down. It'll actually help you drift off into sleep. And you can wake up without a hangover effect. So supplements are okay. Eating your meal a few hours before bedtime, avoiding alcohol a few hours before bedtime, maybe some stretching exercises, but no other activating exercises before bedtime. Your to-do list, your worry list, your wind down routine, and you will be regulating your sleep schedules naturally the way you're supposed to.
I love it. I love it. Dr. Shane, unbelievable, man. Just so much good advice. Just so much great stuff. Where can people find you? Online, social media, those type of things. I'll have Janelle put a bit in the chat box here, but where can we find you, man, for people that want to follow you, people that want to, follow, join your tribe, so to speak, get some of your products, get your book. Where can we find you?
Yeah, so on Instagram, it's Peak Sleep Performance. I have a lot of helpful advice for people right there. People can contact me directly on Peak Sleep Performance on Instagram, and my website, shanecreado.com. And I do sleep coaching online for people no matter where in the world they are. So I have all these resources for people, and of course the book. So the book is going to have so much information for people, just eager to help, eager to contribute to people's lives and improve the quality of their lives and help them on this journey, just like your message, Jimmy. So I'm so grateful for this opportunity. Thank you for having me on. And I'm happy to answer any questions, anything in the comments as well that come up from this conversation today.
I appreciate your time so much, doctor. And again, get this book. I'm telling you, if even if you don't have sleep related issues, there is so much information in this book that can help you just perform better. And this is why I was so adamant about getting you on, Dr. Shane, because the entire Be a Pro platform is about helping people be and live as that best version of themselves, helping people be better, people on that path to their own personal greatness. And look, if we're not prioritizing our sleep, if we're not getting a good night's sleep, and if we are trying to operate at high levels, sleep deprived, it's just not going to happen. And so I think this was some great information. Very, very impactful episode here on the Be a Pro series. And so thankful to have had you on, man. And look forward to us continuing the relationship and continuing the conversation. As we talked earlier, for those people that are going to tune in later, ask those questions in the chat box, in the comment box, and myself and Dr. Shane are going to go in, over the next couple of days and answer some of those. So, the interaction doesn't end here when the live stream ends. Dr. Shane's committed to answering some of those questions that you guys have after the live stream has ended. And we're just going to continue to try to bring you great content and great guests. And Dr. Shane, again, I appreciate you so much. And thank you. And guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Be a Pro series. Love you guys. Have a great weekend. And as always, I challenge you, go out and be a pro. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jimmy.